Mark, Lucy, and Jake Johnson thought their lives were finally moving forward, until Vanessa came into their home, bringing with her a darkness none of them could have imagined. What started as a hopeful new chapter quickly spiraled into a nightmare that would tear their family apart and leave a community questioning how someone so dangerous could hide behind a smile. Mark Johnson's life was the kind of story many would envy. As a devoted single father, he had dedicated himself entirely to raising his two children, Lucy and Jake, after their mother passed away several years earlier. Living in a quiet suburban neighborhood where neighbors knew each other by name, Mark worked long hours at his job to provide a stable and comfortable life. His children thrived in school and were well liked among their friends. The household was filled with love, laughter, and routine, a safe place that shielded them from the hardships they had already endured. Then Vanessa entered their lives. She was unlike anyone Mark had ever met, warm, charming, and seemingly genuine. She had a magnetic personality that instantly drew people toward her, and Mark was no exception. When he introduced Vanessa to Lucy and Jake, they were cautiously optimistic. After years of loss and hardship, the children wanted to believe that their father had finally found someone who could bring happiness back into their lives. Vanessa quickly became a part of the family, moving in shortly after their first few meetings. At first, she was attentive, making efforts to connect with the kids and create a sense of normalcy. But as weeks passed, subtle changes began to take root. The laughter that once echoed through the halls started to fade. Lucy noticed Vanessa's cold glances, often catching her mother's boyfriend staring at Jake with a look that felt more like a warning than affection. Jake, once cheerful and carefree, began to retreat into himself. He stopped sharing stories from school and started having nightmares that left him shaking in the middle of the night. Lucy grew worried, but every time she tried to voice her concerns to Mark, he dismissed them. He told her she was imagining things, or that the kids just needed time to adjust to the new family setup. Vanessa's influence over Mark grew stronger with each passing day. She was persuasive and intelligent, slowly isolating Mark from friends and family who might have warned him about her true nature. Social gatherings stopped. Phone calls went unanswered. The walls Mark had built to protect his family now became barriers that trapped them inside Vanessa's control. She appeared to be the perfect partner to the outside world, supportive, loving, and nurturing, while behind closed doors, the atmosphere was tense and cold. The tension peaked one afternoon when Lucy found Jake with bruises on his arm. The marks were fresh and unmistakably caused by force. When Lucy confronted Vanessa, she offered weak excuses and tried to shift blame, but the damage was clear. Lucy rushed to tell Mark, hoping he would finally see the truth. Instead, Mark's reaction was painful. He refused to believe Vanessa could harm his son and accused Lucy of making things up to cause trouble. The family's fragile foundation was cracking. What once was a hopeful new chapter now felt like a nightmare unfolding slowly. Vanessa's grip tightened, and Mark's love blinded him to the warning signs. Lucy and Jake felt trapped in a house that no longer felt safe, waiting for a moment when everything could change forever. The house that once felt like a sanctuary for Lucy and Jake slowly transformed into a place of fear and confusion. Vanessa's presence grew heavier with each passing day, and her true nature began to reveal itself in subtle but disturbing ways. She no longer tried to hide the sharpness in her tone or the coldness in her eyes when she looked at the children. Small things that once seemed insignificant soon piled up, creating a growing sense of dread inside the Johnson home. Lucy noticed how Vanessa's patience was razor-thin. Simple mistakes were met with harsh words and glaring stares. Jake, who had always been a joyful boy, started shrinking under Vanessa's watchful eye. His once bright and lively spirit dimmed. The nightmares that plagued him at night became more frequent and intense, leaving him trembling and exhausted. Despite his young age, Jake tried to hide the fear from Mark, knowing his father still refused to believe anything was wrong. Every corner of the house seemed to hold a new mystery. Objects would go missing only to be found hidden in strange places, and Vanessa's explanations never added up. Lucy felt like she was constantly walking on eggshells, careful not to trigger Vanessa's unpredictable mood swings. At school, Lucy began to withdraw, her grades slipping as the weight of the home situation pressed on her mind. She felt isolated, unable to tell friends what was really happening or how scared she was. Mark, meanwhile, was caught in Vanessa's web of manipulation. She was skilled at presenting a perfect image to the outside world. To neighbors and co-workers, she was the ideal partner and stepmother, supportive, loving, and involved. Mark, desperate to believe that Vanessa was good for his family, ignored the growing signs of trouble. He dismissed Lucy's concerns as teenage rebellion or jealousy, blaming stress and change for Jake's nightmares and withdrawn behavior. The tension in the house grew unbearable one afternoon when Lucy discovered the bruises on Jake's arm. They were dark and angry looking, fresh enough to be undeniable. Panic surged through her as she realized Vanessa's control had crossed a dangerous line. Lucy wanted to scream, to get help, but fear held her back. She knew how Mark would react, and she didn't want to lose what little stability was left. In the days that followed, Lucy watched Vanessa closely, hoping to catch more proof of the harm she was causing. The silence around the house was oppressive. Vanessa rarely spoke directly to Mark anymore, instead focusing her anger and frustration on the children. Lucy's attempts to protect her brother grew more desperate, but with Mark still under Vanessa's spell, their voices went unheard. Isolation became the family's new reality. Vanessa discouraged Mark from seeing his old friends and family, slowly cutting off the people who might intervene. The house, once filled with warmth and light, became a prison of fear and secrets. Lucy and Jake found themselves trapped in a nightmare they could not wake from, waiting for someone to notice, to help, to save them from the darkness that had taken hold of their home. The nightmare reached its darkest point the day Jake disappeared. It began as an ordinary morning, but by midday, panic had taken over the Johnson household. Mark returned home from work to find the house eerily silent. Vanessa was nowhere to be seen, and Lucy was pacing anxiously, her eyes filled with fear. Jake was gone. There was no sign of where he could have gone, no note, no message. The small community that once saw the Johnson family as a picture of stability was now gripped by confusion and dread. Mark's disbelief quickly turned to alarm as he and Lucy searched every corner of their home and yard. They called neighbors, friends, and anyone who might have seen Jake. The local police were contacted and a search was launched. Flyers with Jake's photo were posted around town. The news spread quickly, turning a quiet suburb into a frantic scene of worry and speculation. As the investigation unfolded, troubling details began to surface about Vanessa. The police learned she had slipped away the day Jake went missing, leaving behind a trail of unanswered questions. When detectives looked deeper into Vanessa's background, they found disturbing inconsistencies. Vanessa had used multiple names in the past and moved frequently, always leaving behind a string of broken relationships and unexplained events. Several previous towns reported similar incidents of children disappearing or being harmed, all linked to women who matched Vanessa's description. The community's shock grew. People who once admired Vanessa were now questioning everything. How had Mark not seen the warning signs? How could someone so dangerous have slipped into their lives unnoticed? Mark, overwhelmed by guilt and fear, clung to the hope that Jake was still alive and could be found. Lucy tried to hold on to strength. Despite the crushing fear that her little brother might never return, she replayed every moment, every conversation, hoping to find something she had missed. Meanwhile, police officers interviewed everyone connected to the family and examined Vanessa's belongings for clues. Her digital footprints led to more questions than answers. But one thing became clear. Vanessa was involved in Jake's disappearance. The search stretched for days, involving volunteers, law enforcement, and even nearby communities. The tension was unbearable as time passed without any sign of Jake. Families in the neighborhood stayed indoors, fearful for their own children. Every phone call brought hope that was quickly dashed. Then, after nearly a week, the breakthrough came. Jake was found alive, hidden in a remote cabin miles away from the town. He was scared, hungry, and traumatized, but unharmed. Vanessa was there too, barricaded inside, claiming she was protecting Jake from his father and the outside world. The situation was tense and dangerous, but law enforcement managed to safely rescue Jake and take Vanessa into custody. The discovery shocked everyone and raised more questions than it answered. Why had Vanessa kidnapped Jake? What had she planned next? And how had Mark been so blind to the woman's true nature? The family's nightmare was far from over, but Jake's return marked the first step toward uncovering the dark truth behind Vanessa's twisted control. After Jake was rescued and Vanessa taken into custody, the investigation shifted into high gear. What initially seemed like a case of kidnapping now unraveled into something far more disturbing. Authorities began digging into Vanessa's past, determined to understand who she really was and what had driven her to such extremes. What they uncovered was shocking. Vanessa was not the woman Mark had believed her to be. She had used multiple aliases over the years, moving from town to town under different names, always leaving a trail of broken relationships and unanswered questions behind her. Background checks revealed that several previous partners had reported strange and troubling behavior, though nothing had ever led to serious charges, until now. Further inquiry exposed a darker pattern. In each town Vanessa lived, children had mysteriously gone missing or suffered unexplained injuries. Though nothing was conclusively tied to her at first, the similarities were impossible to ignore. Police departments from several states shared information and found unsettling connections. Vanessa's history was full of secrecy and manipulation, and she had a talent for hiding her true self beneath a charming and caring facade. Vanessa's personal life was a maze of lies. She claimed different stories about her background, family, and work. Friends and acquaintances from past towns described her as controlling and volatile, but no one expected her to be capable of harm to children. Her ability to manipulate people was alarming. She could appear loving and supportive one moment, then cold and threatening the next. As investigators pieced together her timeline, they discovered that Vanessa's obsession with control had escalated over the years. The Johnson family was just another chapter in her long history of manipulation. It became clear that her relationship with Mark was based on control, isolating him from the outside world, and gradually turning the family into her captive audience. Experts who studied Vanessa's behavior suggested she suffered from a dangerous mix of psychological issues, including a need for power and an inability to form genuine emotional connections. Her actions were driven by obsession and a desire to dominate, which turned deadly when Jake became a pawn in her twisted game. Mark's shock was profound as he learned more about Vanessa's past. He struggled to reconcile the woman he thought he loved with the person the police described. His trust had been shattered, and the guilt weighed heavily on him for failing to protect his children sooner. Lucy and Jake's pain was deep, but the family was relieved that Vanessa was finally behind bars. The case quickly drew media attention, sparking debates about how someone like Vanessa could slip through the cracks for so long. Authorities vowed to improve communication between departments to prevent similar cases from happening in the future. Vanessa faced multiple charges: kidnapping, child abuse, and fraud, among others. The trial promised to reveal even more about her dark past and twisted motives. For the Johnson family, the unmasking of Vanessa was a grim but necessary step toward healing, a painful reminder of the danger hidden behind a friendly smile. The moment Jake was safely returned marked a bittersweet victory for the Johnson family. Relief washed over Mark and Lucy, but the shadows Vanessa left behind were deep and long-lasting. Though Jake was physically unharmed, the trauma he endured would take much longer to heal. The family faced an uncertain future, forever changed by the woman who had nearly torn them apart. Vanessa's arrest brought a sense of justice, but also forced Mark to confront harsh realities. He wrestled with guilt for not recognizing the warning signs sooner, and for allowing Vanessa to isolate the family. His love and trust had blinded him, and the consequences were painful and far-reaching. Mark vowed to rebuild his family and protect his children at all costs, but the road ahead was steep and uncertain. For Lucy and Jake, life after Vanessa was a mixture of relief and struggle. The nightmares and fear did not vanish overnight. Therapy sessions became part of their routine as they worked to process what had happened. Trust, once broken, was difficult to restore. Both children had to learn to feel safe again within the walls of their own home and in the outside world. The community that once admired the Johnson family rallied around them. Neighbors, friends, and even strangers offered support in many ways: meals, company, and encouragement. The family found strength in these acts of kindness, knowing they were not alone. At the same time, the experience left an indelible mark, reminding everyone that danger can hide behind the most unsuspecting faces. Vanessa's trial drew intense public attention, as details of her past and the abuse within the Johnson household came to light. The courtroom became a stage for difficult truths. The evidence was overwhelming, and Vanessa's web of lies unraveled under the scrutiny of investigators and lawyers. Her motives, twisted and fueled by obsession, horrified those who listened. When the verdict came, Vanessa was convicted on multiple charges, including kidnapping and child abuse. The sentencing was severe, reflecting the gravity of her crimes and the lasting impact on the Johnson family. Though justice was served, the scars she left could not be erased by any court ruling. In the months and years that followed, Mark dedicated himself to healing his family. He rebuilt trust with Lucy and Jake, strengthened bonds, and sought to create an environment filled with love and safety. Slowly, laughter returned to their home, but the memories of Vanessa's control and cruelty remained a painful reminder of what they had endured. The story of the demonic girlfriend, who nearly destroyed a family, became a cautionary tale shared widely, an urgent warning to listen closely when children speak out and to look beyond appearances. The Johnson family's journey was one of survival and resilience, showing that even after the darkest storms, hope and healing are possible.